Have you ever walked into a room and noticed that the person saying the least somehow commands the most respect? That set's not an accident. That set's not a coincidence. That set's what power looks like when it's set silent. See, society has fooled you into believing that the man constantly talking, constantly posting, constantly needing attention is the one who's winning. The smartest people, the most dangerous ones, are the quietest in the room. They don't need to talk because they're too busy observing. They're gathering data. They're calculating their next move while everyone else is busy trying to be seen. People talk too much. They talk to fill silence because they're insecure. Because deep down, they're afraid of being forgotten or ignored. Smart people aren't. Smart people are comfortable being ghosts. They're comfortable watching the world play its little games while they build in the shadows. They understand that noise is cheap. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone's trying to go viral. But intelligence is quiet. Wisdom is quiet. You don't see lions screaming in the jungle. They move in silence and strike with precision. It's the same with smart people. They don't need to shout. They let results speak. There's a reason why the most successful people often say the least in meetings. They've already done their homework. They don't need to prove anything. The guy constantly trying to sound smart, he's trying to convince himself more than anyone else. Real intelligence doesn't perform. It doesn't put on a show. It simply exists. And it's felt. That's why when smart people finally speak, the room gets quiet. Everyone listens. Because they know it's not empty noise, it's calculated. It's sharp. It's rare. Being quiet isn't about shyness. It's about control. It's about knowing the value of your energy. Every time you speak, you give something away. Your thoughts, your emotions, your strategies. Smart people understand this. That's why they keep things close to their chest. They don't expose their plans. They don't explain themselves to people who will never understand. Silence becomes their armor, their way of protecting power from leaking. We live in a world where everyone's trying to be heard. But the truth is, if you're really valuable, you don't need to shout. People will come find you. They'll pay attention when you finally speak. But if you're constantly running your mouth, people get used to your voice, and then it loses weight. Smart people use silence like a blade, sharp, intentional, and deadly when needed. Most people talk because they're afraid. Afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of being irrelevant, afraid of being alone. But smart people understand something most don't. Silence is strength. When you're silent, you hear more. You notice more. You become a master of reading people, reading situations. You learn that while others are trying to win the moment with words, you're setting yourself up to win the war with action. You want to be respected? Then shut your mouth and let your life do the talking. Let your discipline speak. Let your bank account speak. Let your physique, your confidence, your results do the talking. Smart people stay quiet because they've learned that most people aren't listening to understand. They're just listening to reply. Why waste your breath? There's a hidden confidence in silence. The ability to sit at a table, say nothing, and still control the room. That's power. That's presence. Loud people may take the spotlight for a moment, but quiet people own the stage in the long run. Because smart people don't chase attention. They attract it by being different. While others are addicted to noise, they become masters of peace. And peace is rare in this world. Peace is power. The reason smart people stay quiet is because they don't need validation. They validate themselves. They know who they are, what they stand for, where they're going. They don't ask for directions from people who've never been where they're heading. And they sure as hell don't waste energy trying to impress the masses. That's the difference between the average man and the elite one. The other needs legacy. Understand this. Every word you speak can be used against you. Every thought you share too early can be sabotaged. Smart people move in silence, not out of fear, but out of strategy. They understand timing. They understand leverage. They don't play chess emotionally. They make their moves when the board is set, and not a moment before you want to level up. Start talking less. Listen more. Watch people. Learn the game. Observe how they think, how they react, how they move. You'll be surprised how much you pick up when you're not the one filling the silence. You'll start to see what others miss. And then, when the time is right, you strike. Quietly, powerfully, without warning. The smartest men in history weren't the ones who talked the most. They were the ones who made the biggest moves in the shadows. Behind every loud crowd, there's always a quiet mastermind pulling strings. Be that guy. Be the one who doesn't need to be seen to be effective. Be the ghost they can't predict, the shadow they can't control. In the end, remember this: empty barrels make the most noise. Don't be the guy who always trying to be heard. Be a guy who always heard when he speaks. Be intentional. Be surgical. And most of all, be quiet. because silence isn't set weakness. It sets warfare. And smart people, they already won the battle before they ever said a word. But let's get deeper now, because silence doesn't just protect your strategy, it protects your energy. Smart people have figured out one of life's most powerful truths. Most conversations are not worth having. Most debates go nowhere. Most people don't want truth, they want comfort. So instead of wasting hours arguing with people who are emotionally attached to ignorance, smart people stay quiet. They don't waste energy where there's no return. They conserve their mental power for what actually matters: progress, growth. Now you might ask, but one set people misunderstand me if I stay quiet. And the answer is yes. But here steps the truth. People will misunderstand you no matter what. Whether you speak or stay silent, people will create stories about you based on their own insecurities. So why waste energy trying to control perception? Smart people don't play that game. They don't explain themselves to people who made up their mind. They let their consistency define them, not their explanations. And here's something else you don't hear enough. Your silence makes people uncomfortable. Because most people are addicted to noise. They're used to people oversharing, overtalking, over-explaining. So when someone shows up and doesn't say much, they get nervous. They start to wonder, what set's he thinking? Why isn't he saying anything? That's power. That's control. That's what happens when you move like a king, not like a clown. This is why smart men don't speak about goals. They don't brag about what sits next. They don't announce every move on social media because they know something the loud world doesn't sit. Success doesn't need a preview. It needs patience. Quiet builds momentum. And when the results finally hit, everyone else is left shocked. Well, you already saw it coming. Let me tell you something dangerous. Every time you open your mouth, you're either building power or leaking it. Most people are leaking it. They say too much, too fast, to the wrong people. Smart people speak when necessary, when it adds value, when it changes the game, when it's time to execute. Until then, they observe, they study, they wait. Silence also exposes the truth. When you're quiet, you start to see who talks just to talk. You see who's insecure, who's lying, who's trying too hard. The mask comes off. In silence, people reveal who they really are because they can't stand the tension. That's when you get the advantage. That's when you get the upper hand. Not by fighting, but by watching. Now let's flip it. When smart people finally speak, every word lands with impact because they been rehearsing it mentally for hours, days, even weeks. They not talking to fill air. They're talking to move mountains. That's why one sentence from a focused man can change the atmosphere. That's real strength. Here's another reason smart people stay quiet. They've seen enough. They've experienced betrayal. They've watched friends turn fake. They've dealt with people who use information against them. So now they don't broadcast anything. They've learned the hard way that privacy isn't paranoia. It's protection. You don't need the world to know your next move. You don't need approval. You need results. And results don't need a microphone. In relationships, silence can also be a test. Smart men don't argue emotionally. If someone's trying to manipulate them, guilt trip them, provoke them, they don't fight fire with fire. They go cold. They go quiet, because silence isn't passive, it's dominant. It says, I've already made my decision, and I don't owe you a performance. That kind of control, it sits rare, and it sits respected, even by those who hate it. Now let's talk about leadership. The best leaders are often the calmest, the quietest, not because they're weak, but because they don't need to flex authority. They embody it. Real leaders don't panic. They stay composed, even when everything is burning. And that energy, it spreads. People follow the one who's calm under pressure, not the one who's shouting orders. Smart people understand this, that their silence becomes a lighthouse when everyone else is lost in the storm. If you want to be elite, if you want to be unstoppable, train yourself to love the silence. Train yourself to walk into rooms and not need to be heard. Let others talk. Let them reveal everything. And you take notes. You conserve energy. You become the mystery. Because in a world that can't shut, silence becomes a superpower. And when you finally do speak, speak with purpose. Speak with fire. Speak after you've earned the right to be heard. Not from ego, but from impact. That's the move. That's how smart people win, not with noise, but with nuclear silence, followed by undeniable action. So don't be afraid to be quiet. Don't let the world convince you that silence is weakness. It's the exact opposite. It's the mark of someone who doesn't need attention to feel alive. It's the mark of someone who is building, sharpening, preparing, While others waste years trying to be seen, smart people master the art of being felt without saying a word.